Why is it that two people can face the same crisis, the same setback, even the same betrayal, and one walks away stronger, more focused, more determined to lead, while the other sinks into despair, pointing fingers at the world? It's a question that whispers in every hallway of power, every broken relationship, every startup failure, every political downfall. We see it in the office when someone gets passed over for promotion. One storms out, the other steps up. We see it in life after heartbreak. One closes down, the other reinvents themselves. Same pain. Different outcomes. Why? The answer, though uncomfortable, is profound. Some people think like leaders, others like victims. It's not about what happens to you, it's about how you think about what happens to you. And no one, perhaps in the history of human thought, understood this mental divide better than Niccolò Machiavelli. Dismissed for centuries as a cold manipulator, Machiavelli was far more than just a political schemer whispering tactics into a prince's ear. He was a psychologist of power, a philosopher of strategy, a master observer of how the weak surrender and how the strong rise, not by chance, but by mentality. This is not about being cruel, unethical, or heartless. This is about understanding one simple, brutal truth: the world does not reward those who wait for fairness. It rewards those who seize opportunity, adapt quickly, read people wisely, and most importantly, take responsibility for their reality. But how do you develop that mindset? How do you stop seeing yourself as a pawn and start acting like a player? Not just in politics, but in work, relationships, your goals, your future. To understand that, we must go deep, not just into Machiavelli's most famous work, The Prince, but into the subtle psychology behind his words. We must dismantle the idea that leadership is about titles or charisma. Leadership is first and foremost an inner posture, a way of seeing and responding to the world. Let's be brutally honest, the victim mentality is seductive. It absolves us of responsibility. It's not my fault. They betrayed me. The system is unfair. I would have succeeded if only. We all dip into it from time to time. Why? Because it feels safe. It feels righteous. It makes us believe we're good, while the world is bad. But slowly, subtly, it poisons our ability to act. In contrast, the leader mentality is hard. It demands you own your power, even when things are unfair, even when others lie or cheat or fail you. It doesn't mean you ignore injustice, it means you see it clearly, and still ask, what can I do? What is in my control? How do I move forward, smarter? Machiavelli knew this distinction instinctively. He didn't write for idealists or dreamers. He wrote for those who wanted to move the pieces on the board. To think like a leader in his world was not about being liked or being perfect, it was about being effective. And to be effective, you must think differently than the average person. That's the secret no one teaches you in school. The leader and the victim are looking at the same facts, but drawing opposite conclusions. Let's look at an example. Imagine you're betrayed by a close friend. The victim asks, why did they do this to me? They spiral into bitterness, self-pity, and paralysis. The leader asks, what did I miss in their character? What does this reveal about the game I'm in? What do I learn from this pain? Same event. Different questions. Different future. The difference is subtle but life-altering. The victim reacts. The leader responds. The victim blames. The leader analyzes. The victim waits. The leader acts. This is not cold-heartedness, it's clarity. And clarity is the true foundation of strength. But here's what makes Machiavelli's philosophy truly radical: he didn't believe that leaders were born. He believed they could be trained. Formed. Shaped by experience. Forged in fire. He believed the quality of your thinking determined the quality of your power. And so, to think like a leader, not a victim, we must start by examining how we interpret the world. Are you always waiting for someone to rescue you, promote you, choose you, validate you? Or are you learning how the game works, and preparing to play it better? Are you obsessed with how things should be, or are you dealing with how things are? Are you stuck in fantasy, or building strategy? These questions are uncomfortable. But they're the first step. Because the leader mentality does not begin with external power, it begins with internal ownership. You stop outsourcing responsibility for your life. You stop needing constant fairness or praise. You stop explaining your lack of results with 1,000 excuses. Instead, you ask, what must I become to overcome this? That's Machiavellian. Now, you might say, but what if I am being treated unfairly? What if people are trying to sabotage me? And the answer, again, is Machiavellian: assume they are. Prepare anyway. Adapt anyway. Win anyway. This isn't pessimism. It's realism. And realism, as Machiavelli wrote, is what protects you from delusion and empowers real change. Because here's the truth that separates leaders from victims: always, leaders don't need life to be easy. They need life to be clear. Once they see reality as it is, they move. They pivot. They protect their peace, adjust their strategy, and keep pushing forward. The victim, however, needs life to be fair, and when it's not, they collapse. This isn't about morality. It's about mentality. Leadership is not a moral status. It's a strategic stance. And if you want to think like a leader in the real world, in your career, relationships, or creative pursuits, you must train yourself to look at life through Machiavelli's eyes: cool, calculating, and never blind to human nature. You must trade comfort for clarity, emotion for execution, theory for action. You must be willing to say, even if this isn't my fault, it's still my responsibility to fix. That's the beginning. That's the shift. That's when the victim dies and the leader is born. Machiavelli's name has become a byword for manipulation, deception, even evil. Say Machiavellian today and most people imagine a cold villain in a tailored suit, pulling strings behind the scenes. But that's a lazy caricature. The truth is more interesting and more useful. Niccolò Machiavelli was not celebrating evil. He was describing reality. And he believed that those who want to lead, whether nations or themselves, must first open their eyes to the truth of human nature, rather than be lulled to sleep by illusions. Let's be clear, Machiavelli didn't invent power. He simply observed it more honestly than anyone before him. In his most famous work, The Prince, Machiavelli lays out a brutally direct view of leadership. But what most people miss is that beneath the surface of ruthlessness lies a deeper message: to survive and thrive, you must think with clarity, not wishful thinking. You must adapt your strategy to the real world, not the world you wish existed. In one of his most quoted lines, he writes, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." This phrase scandalized generations of moral philosophers, but what Machiavelli meant was not that you should aim to be cruel. He meant that if you must choose between being respected and being liked, always choose respect. Because in moments of crisis, people follow strength, not sentiment. This is one of the first rules of thinking like a leader: stop chasing approval, start commanding respect. Victims need to be liked. Leaders need to be effective. That doesn't mean being a tyrant, it means being willing to say and do what is necessary, even if it's unpopular. Another core principle of Machiavelli's thinking is this: you must see people as they are, not as they pretend to be. He believed that most people are fickle, selfish, and easily swayed. That's not pessimism, that's pattern recognition. And once you see that, you can stop expecting perfect loyalty or fairness from others. You can plan accordingly. You can stop being shocked by betrayal, and start preparing for it. Think about that for a moment. How much emotional suffering comes not from what happens, but from our naive expectation that it shouldn't happen. We get hurt because we assume others will behave nobly, consistently, or gratefully. But Machiavelli would ask, why did you expect that? Did you study their incentives, their fears, their past behavior? This leads us to another powerful shift in thinking, from judgment to analysis. Victims say, this is wrong. Leaders say, this is real. What do I do about it? That's a mindset rooted in strategy, not sentiment. Another vital Machiavellian insight: fortune favors the bold, but preparation favors the wise. He acknowledged that luck plays a role in life, but he also argued that fortune only benefits those who are ready to seize it. He uses the metaphor of a river, sometimes calm, sometimes raging, always unpredictable. The wise ruler builds dams and levees before the flood. The fool prays it won't rain. In your life, that means this: don't wait for opportunity, build yourself into the kind of person who is ready when it comes. Don't just wish for success, prepare for difficulty. Train your mind. Sharpen your skills. Know your enemies. Understand your environment. This is the opposite of victimhood. The victim blames the rain. The leader builds the dam. One of the most controversial but essential Machiavellian lessons is this: appearances matter. Not in a vain, shallow way, but because perception shapes power. He writes that a prince must appear virtuous, even if he sometimes must act against virtue to protect the state. Again, this doesn't mean being a liar or a fraud. It means understanding that people follow symbols, not just facts. If you want to lead, whether a team, a project, or your own destiny, you must learn how you're perceived. Do you come across as confident or hesitant? Strategic or reactive? Focused or scattered? The victim says, "This is just who I am." The leader says, "Who do I need to become to reach my goal?" Machiavelli's world was not kind. Neither is ours. And that's why his teachings remain relevant, not because they're cynical, but because they are clear-eyed. They show us that true power is not about domination, it's about discernment. It's about understanding the mechanics of human behavior, and using that knowledge to navigate life wisely. To think like a leader, not a victim, means embracing that clarity. It means you no longer wait to be rescued. You don't expect others to act better than their nature. You stop asking for fairness from the universe, and start crafting your own path through it. And in that shift, something powerful happens. You become dangerous, not in a violent way, but in a calm, intelligent, unshakable way. You become the kind of person who can't be manipulated, who sees 3 moves ahead, who knows when to act and when to wait. That's Machiavellian. That's leadership. That's mental sovereignty. So what does it really look like to think like a leader, not a victim, in modern life? You're not a 16th century prince trying to keep control over a city-state in Renaissance Italy. You're living in the 21st century, navigating bosses, breakups, deadlines, digital chaos, and self-doubt. But here's the thing, the principles haven't changed, only the costumes have. Power, insecurity, fear, opportunity, these forces still shape human behavior today, just as they did in Machiavelli's time. And that's good news. Because once you learn how to read them, you can start making sharper moves, no matter what game you're playing. Let's break it down. 1. At work, stop waiting to be noticed, start positioning yourself. Imagine 2 people in the same company. Both are talented, hardworking, and intelligent. But one is constantly frustrated, they don't see my potential. They always pick favorites. I do everything right, and still get overlooked. The other seems to rise steadily, even if they're not perfect. Why? Because one is thinking like a victim, hoping to be discovered. The other is thinking like a leader, strategically managing perception, relationships, and timing. Machiavelli would say, your value must be visible and useful to those in power. Not because it's fair, but because it's how human systems function. He'd advise you to study the decision makers. What do they value? What are they afraid of? How can your results help solve their problems? This isn't manipulation, it's adaptation. Stop expecting fairness. Start creating leverage. Ask yourself, who do I need to become in order to be undeniable? 2. In relationships, replace emotional reactivity with strategic self-respect. Let's say someone you love starts treating you with less care, less consistency. The victim mindset kicks in. Why are they doing this to me? What did I do wrong? Maybe if I try harder, they'll change. But the leader mindset thinks differently. What is this teaching me about what I'm tolerating? Where am I abandoning my own boundaries? Is this behavior aligned with what I want long-term? Machiavelli didn't write about romantic love, but his lessons on power and loyalty apply perfectly. If someone takes you for granted, it's often because they believe they can. Human nature defaults to comfort, and comfort breeds neglect, unless boundaries are maintained. A Machiavellian thinker doesn't beg for love. They observe, they withdraw energy from disrespect, and they choose alignment over attachment. Not from bitterness, but from clarity. From self-leadership. Remember, it's not about controlling others. It's about controlling your standards. 3. In crisis, see the game, not just the pain. Life falls apart sometimes. You lose your job, your partner leaves, you get betrayed, your plan crashes. In these moments, it's so easy to collapse into the victim state. Why me? It's not fair. This always happens to me. But the Machiavellian leader steps back. They feel the pain, but they also ask, what does this reveal? Every crisis contains hidden data. Who supported you, and who disappeared? What system failed you, and what blind spots did it expose? What weaknesses in your preparation were revealed? In The Prince, Machiavelli often warned leaders not to become too comfortable during peaceful times. Why? Because peace hides danger. He advised constant vigilance, even in moments of calm, because the next storm is always coming. Those who prepare quietly are the ones who survive loudly. So when crisis hits, the leader does not collapse. They collect intelligence, recalibrate, and rebuild stronger. Not emotionally unaffected, but emotionally disciplined. That's leadership. That's power. That's evolution under pressure. 4. In self-development, stop chasing motivation, start building strategy. So many people wait to feel ready before making a move. They wait for the perfect moment to start their business, write the book, take the leap. When the energy is high, they act. When it fades, they retreat. This is emotional leadership. But strategic leadership, Machiavellian leadership, ignores emotional weather. It builds systems. It moves even when it doesn't feel like it. Machiavelli believed in virtue, not in the moral sense, but in the sense of personal force, competence, and will. Virtue is your ability to impose order on chaos. To do what is necessary, not what is convenient. To shape fate, not beg from it. Victims wait to feel strong. Leaders act, and become strong through action. So ask yourself, do I run on feelings or on focus? If motivation disappears, do I disappear too? Or do I have a strategy that survives my moods? 5. In identity, choose who you become, not what you've been. Here's the final, and perhaps most powerful shift of all: the Machiavellian leader does not accept identity as fixed. They don't say, I'm just not a confident person. I'm just bad at decisions. I'm not a leader. That's the language of the victim, the belief that personality is destiny. But Machiavelli saw identity as fluid, shaped by environment, experience, and intention. You are what you build. You become what you repeat. And so if you want to lead your team, your family, your future, you must start thinking like a sculptor, not a prisoner. Ask yourself, what traits must I develop to win this game? What version of me must die so that the next one can be born? Because here's the deepest truth of all Machiavellian thinking. Power is not something you demand. It is something you become. And to become that version of yourself, you must let go of the identity that clings to powerlessness. Why is it that two people can go through the same setback, and one breaks while the other breaks through? It's not about intelligence. Not luck. Not even experience. It's mindset. One sees themselves as a victim, powerless, trapped, waiting. The other sees the same problem and thinks, okay, how do I move through this? What's my next smart move? That's the difference Machiavelli was always talking about. He didn't believe in waiting for justice. He believed in learning how the game works, and playing it better than everyone else. Thinking like a leader doesn't mean you're always confident or fearless. It means you pause before reacting. You analyze. You move with intent, not impulse. That moment between trigger and response. That's where power lives. Most people never stop to think about that pause. They get angry and send the text. They feel insecure and shrink. They feel overlooked and start complaining. But the leader asks, what outcome do I want? What move shifts this in my favor? And it's not fake. It's not manipulation. It's control over yourself first. Machiavelli understood that if you can't govern your own emotions, you'll never lead anything else. So you practice. You slow your voice. You breathe deeper. You speak a little less, listen a little more. You learn to act, not just react. People respect calm. People trust clarity. That becomes your edge. Another key shift. Stop needing life to be fair. Start asking, what is functional? What works? What doesn't? You'll waste years waiting for fairness. But when you understand how people really operate, what drives them, what scares them, what they respond to, you can stop being surprised. You stop getting hurt by patterns you should have already seen. That's when life gets lighter. Not easier, but lighter. You're not carrying disappointment like a weight anymore. You're studying it. Using it. Learning from it. It also helps to think like a general once a week. Sit down, no distractions, and ask yourself, where am I wasting energy? Where do I have leverage I'm not using? Who has influence over what I want, and how am I showing up there? You'd be surprised how much clarity you get when you actually stop and look at the board like it's a strategy game. And you don't need to be cold or ruthless to do this. You just need to stop being naive. Every day, you remind yourself who you are becoming. Through tiny rituals. Through reflection. Not for motivation, but for identity. You tell yourself, I don't beg for control, I build it. I don't collapse in chaos, I study it. I don't just survive, I adapt. These aren't just phrases. They're rewiring your mind. Because honestly, most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they never trained their thinking. They never stepped out of their own emotions long enough to see the bigger game. But you're not most people. You're reading this. You're awake. You're learning to lead yourself first, then everything else. That's what Machiavelli was really trying to teach. Not cruelty. Not manipulation. But awareness. Precision. Power with purpose. And once you taste what it feels like to live from that place, not fear, not luck, but clarity, you'll never go back to begging for permission again. So what actually changes when you start thinking like a leader instead of a victim? Everything. But not in some dramatic, movie-like explosion. It's quieter than that. More internal. More subtle. Like walking into the same room you've walked into 100 times, but this time, you're not looking for approval. You're not scanning for safety. You're not reacting. You're choosing. You don't need to dominate. You just stop shrinking. That's where it begins. You feel it in conversations, you speak slower. You don't fill awkward silences just to keep the peace. You listen more, but when you talk, people pay attention. Because there's weight in your words now. You're not talking to be liked. You're speaking with direction. Intention. You're not trying to win every argument anymore either. That urge fades. You realize, winning small fights is for people who've lost the bigger war inside themselves. And you're not in that war anymore. You're building something. You're choosing where your energy goes, what you respond to, who gets your attention, and who doesn't. People start to feel it, too. That shift. Maybe they don't know what changed. Maybe they can't explain it. But something about you feels different. You don't complain like you used to. You don't gossip. You don't carry that heavy, constant frustration that so many do. You're grounded. Still. Like someone who's figured out that being in control doesn't mean controlling others, it means mastering yourself. And don't get it twisted, it's not like pain disappears. You still face hard days. People still disappoint you. Plans still fall apart. But when it happens, you don't spiral into helplessness anymore. You take the hit, you feel it, and then you move. Not emotionally. Strategically. You ask better questions now. Not, why is this happening to me, but what can I do with this? What lesson is hidden here? What leverage can I find in this chaos? That one shift alone, that question, can change the entire course of someone's life. And you know what else? You stop giving your power away so easily. You stop needing everyone to understand you. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop making yourself small just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. That's a deep kind of freedom. The kind most people will never taste. Because it requires walking through some uncomfortable truth. It requires being honest with yourself. About your patterns. About the lies you've told yourself. About the way you've sometimes played helpless just to avoid doing the harder work of responsibility. But you've done that work now. Or at least, you've started it. And because of that, your life is starting to reflect the shift. People trust you more. Not because you're always right, but because you're consistent. Grounded. Clear. You don't panic under pressure. You don't make everything about you. You don't chase approval, or play games, or subtly sabotage yourself just to avoid the fear of success. You've outgrown that. And Machiavelli? He would have seen you. Respected you. Because what he really admired wasn't cruelty. It was courage. The courage to face the truth about human nature. The courage to think clearly while others collapse. The courage to take responsibility for your fate, even when every part of you wants to blame something else. This is what it looks like to lead, not with titles or followers or applause, but with clarity. With self-respect. With the ability to shape reality instead of waiting for it to be fair. It starts small. In how you talk to yourself when no one's around. In how you handle rejection. In whether you choose action over excuses. And if you keep going. If you keep showing up, choosing responsibility over victimhood, strategy over chaos, you wake up one day and realize, you're not pretending anymore. You're not copying confidence. You've become it. You've stopped thinking like a victim. And started living like a leader. Not just in words, but in everything.